Thundercast Is Go.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Thundercast Is Go. I'm Aaron Izzard.
And I'm Stephen.
Right, let's jump right into this with this week's episode, Unplugged. The episode begins with Virgil leaving Tracy Island with Grandma Tracy, who's going to spend what looks like she's going to spend some time in London with Lady P, and we get some footage of Lady P and Parker stuck in London traffic. I think everyone's
Does the
been
congestion cut? One thing I ask is the congestion charge still on in the 2060s?
Who knows? Maybe. But Parker honks the horn at the other drivers, to which Lady P says, "Was that really necessary, Parker?" To which Parker says, "It took me all the restraint I have to press the horn, milady, and not the button for the flamethrowers."
Yeah. I loved David Graham's performance. He always nails it as Parker.
He does. He was great in this episode. As Virgil and Grandma come flying in Thunderbird 2, which we get a wonderful shot of a miniature representation of London in 2060, which is a very beautifully made miniature. Suddenly, all the lights across London blink out, and Thunderbird 2 loses all power and begins falling like a stone straight towards London. And right after the opening credits, we get Virgil trying to bring Thunderbird 2 into an emergency landing. And we get, all I can say is, watching this episode, I had Terror in New York City flashbacks.
And what's more, I reckon if you listen to Thunderbird 2 as it skids on the road, there is some harking backs to some of the original episodes as they use some of the cine sounds for the tyre squeals.
Yes, I noticed that as well. I like how they're working that into the new series. I like that. Virgil manages to bring Thunderbird 2 to a complete stop, just inches away from hitting another building, to which Virgil says, "I can't believe I actually did that." As Ko said in the last week's episode, you need to work on your confidence building skills, boys.
And there was also a bit where he said, "I can't believe I did it without getting a mark on it." To which a pigeon poops on the windscreen.
Yes. yes. Yes, I found that quite amusing. It was so not long after that, we find Virgil is now stuck in London with no power, no pods, no equipment. And as him and Grandma disembark Thunderbird 2, a female construction worker up in one of those construction cranes, one of those really tall construction cranes, which apparently they still use in the year 2060. You'd think they'd use something a bit more safer. Starts to lose control because of its heavy load. Virgil thinks about ways he can rescue her. Unfortunately, everything he can think of requires the use of either electricity or his equipment working. And so that is the message of this episode, is Virgil trying to overcome his
over-reliance on technology, mostly.
Yes. And at the same time, Lady Penelope and Parker are trying to find out what's going on as well, as all the cars have been knocked out as well. It's almost like some electromagnetic pulse has just wiped out all the power throughout London for everything.
Although they don't clarify it as an EMP, but an EMF, electromagnetic frequency.
Yes, which I thought was interesting to mention that. I think I've made it notes. Yes. Parker, after Lady Penelope and Parker leave Fab 1, they go to investigate around, and they find a poster, a good old-fashioned paper poster up on the wall with a power on symbol. And apparently this has been left by a group calling themselves the Luddites.
Mm.
Who are
also in relation to the symbol as well. It was, as well as being a power switch, it also had a bit of a bomb reference in there because it had a fuse at the top.
That's correct. As yes, we get introduced to our first sort of, I wouldn't call them, well, I would actually, they're sort of
activists,
but yeah, they are downright absolutely insane at this point. They are absolute loonies. Who we want, but you know, the good old days before there was power, and apparently they go around wearing not only masks but also hoodies as well, with the painted power switch bomb symbol on the masks.
With holes for the eyes, of course.
Yes, with holes for the eyes, and one comment that Parker made was he said, "Cool, blimey, paper, real old-fashioned paper," and he even sniffs it. "Oh, I haven't seen this since my school days." I'm thinking, really? Because has the world advanced that far that paper is no longer used anymore? Because that really is interesting to me. I thought that was interesting. So what do they use to teach kids in school these days? Is everything done through touchpads and that?
Probably. I mean, in some schools they're trying to implement that at the moment, but apart from that, I don't think it would be I don't think there would be as much over reliance on technology as see now. I mean, majority of the time, paper is still used today. And that was set, and the program is set more or less 45 years in the future.
It would make sense that with Parker's age, he would have been about the age we are now. So
now that's a scary thought.
So yeah, Parker, when he was in his 20s, he would have been in his 20s around about this time period. So yeah, he would have had paper when he was at school. He would have had paper notebooks and actual paper textbooks for school. Yeah, that's interesting. Moving on, after following two Luddites into an alley, Parker and Lady P knock both of them out and steal their clothes and uniforms. And I just think Lady Penelope and Parker did excellent in this episode. They did really well. Also, aside from Virgil, Grandma Tracy, Lady Penelope and Parker, and one other character I will mention later on, we get no other main cast for this episode. So technically this has had the least number of characters so far in the series. This episode has the least number of characters. And aside from a voice cameo by Gordon at the beginning, we don't hear any other Tracy brothers, because John can't give any information to them because all communications are out.
Which adds an even more sense of danger as well.
Yeah, and urgency to the situation. And naturally, Grandma... so, Lady Penelope and Parker managed to get in with the Luddites, and they're trying to break in to a secured vault in London, which is... oh God, I haven't written it in my notes. What was it? It was...
The Codex Vault.
That's it. This Codex would give one person the power to control all the power throughout the world. And meanwhile, Lady Penelope and Parker, Parker even mentions, "Oh, I get it. This is like the old lights out trick." And Lady Penelope's like, "Lights out, Parker? Yeah. If there was a vault that we couldn't break into, we'd cut the power so that we could get in. To knock out all the security systems and get in." Which was a nice bit of character building for Parker. And as Lady Penelope says at the end of the episode, "Parker, I don't think I know anyone who has had such a misspent youth as yourself." So yeah, one other piece of note: the woman who Virgil rescues from the fallen crane, she's the same lady from Crosscut, just given red hair.
So more or less reusing character models.
Yeah, like you said last week, that like what they would do in the original series, they would change the puppet's hair or give them a change of clothes to reuse them as background characters. Virgil, however, a lot of stuff in this episode harkens back to the classic series episode Vault of Death. Particularly when Virgil mentions they've managed to figure out using Grandma's compass, because Grandma Tracy either is a technophobe or really doesn't get, advanced technology. And so when they're on the approach to London, she mentions to Virgil she's got her compass and she's got a map, so she's all set. And luckily, the EMF device is giving off an interference field which is messing with the compass, and they can use the compass to find out where it is. Unfortunately, it's underground, and Virgil mentions to Grandma, unless they have something like the mole or some sort of laser drill, they won't be able to get down there. To which Grandma Tracy says, "What about this?" And she points to one of the signs for the London Underground. And Virgil says, yes. "Or we could just use the subway." Which again harkens back to Vault of Death, where they couldn't use the mole because of the pipes and the underground power cables for London. To which Grandma Tracy, back on Tracy Island, says, "Well, I remember when I was a little girl, my grandma used to tell me about the old London subway, trains that ran under the ground. Of course, New York had them too, till this newfangled monorail took over." And that sort of reminded me. And as we see in the episode, it looks like the London Underground has sections that have been shut down, because the section Virgil and Grandma Tracy end up walking down is very dilapidated. All the rails have been rusted, and it's very much in disuse.
I mean, you get a few today. You have a few of the London Underground stations which are hardly ever used out. But I think the London Council is still debating on how to use those.
It seems they're still having that problem in the 2060s. And as the tunnel gets too dark to see, Virgil reaches into his utility belt and pulls out a glow stick, to which he then says, "Thunderbirds are glow." And to which Grandma is confused. I thought all the power was, cut off down here. And Virgil says, "Oh, these don't work with electricity. They work on a chemical reaction." So I like that. The show is semi-educational
and practical.
Yes, very practical. I like that idea that for situations where it would be dangerous to use anything electrical, say in a flooded cave or mine, you could use glow sticks in perfect safety without risk of electrocuting anyone. And I like that idea. I like it. Yeah, I did make a note of that. Virgil Tracy's rave rescue.
Yeah.
It's then that Grandma Tracy and Virgil then they then locate the EMF device, and we get a return of the space mine from Space Race. Although instead of red, it's blue. Instead of having a red pulsating light inside, it's blue this time. So yeah, again, harking back to the old series where they would revamp props to be used for different purposes.
Indeed.
So yeah, well done on that. And luckily, Grandma Tracy gets to shine, as not only does she help Virgil and keep him going, and the line that was best, her best line in this was when she says, "It's not the gear that saves people, it's the Tracy."
Very wise words.
Yeah, and the compass, she says, belonged to her father, who was her husband, Grandpa Tracy.
Yeah.
Who was Jeff's father, and apparently Grandpa Tracy was sort of an Indiana Jones kind of character, when she comments saying that a compass was often the most advanced piece of technology he'd take with him on his adventures.
Which that could offer a lot more in terms of backstory as well. I would like to see that explored in possibly future episodes.
Yeah, so would I. And she also mentions that she intended to give it to Jeff, but sadly Jeff disappeared, and she says she never got the chance to give it to him. And at the end of the episode, she ends up giving it to Virgil. And she says, when you're in doubt, you can always look at it and you'll know to do the right thing. Anyway, back to the plot. Whilst Grandma Tracy whilst A plot is getting along, Lady Penelope and Parker in B plot manage to get into the vault where the rest of the Luddites are, and just as Lady P and Parker are getting ready to leap into action and kick about 6 different types of ass, the beneficiary of the Luddites, who provided them with the know-how and the capability to do this to London, steps into the fray, and we get the reveal. And we get the reveal of our villain for this episode.
Oh yes.
The Hood is back.
Of course.
Of course, he was just using the Luddites as a cover or an excuse to get into the vault. And he says, I have no intention of turning off the power.
Why would I want to live in a world without technology?
Exactly.
I think that was what he said.
Yes. I want to live in a world where I can make... Okay, the biggest gist of it is I want to live in a world where I can make a shitload of money from it. So that was the Hood's plan this episode, to steal the Codex so that he could hold the world's power for ransom. which is a pretty devious idea, because even today our lives are governed by so much technology.
Yeah, and the energy companies keep throwing high prices at us most of the time.
So to have somebody throw that out of balance and hold the world's energy for ransom, you know, that he would hold every major world government by the balls at that point.
Indeed. And that is a scary thought.
Exactly. And luckily, as the Hood attempts to make his escape, he tussles with Parker, who gets locked in the vault with the rest of the Luddites. But luckily, Penelope gets out, and we get a good look at the Hood's carrier ship, which is
it manages to escape from London.
That's right, and we got a couple glimpses of it in the season opener. Ring of Fire. The second part of Ring of Fire. It is a beautiful practical model, I'll add. It's a beautiful looking platform.
So some of the things are again practical.
What else? Yes. Virgil returns to save the trapped after again a lesson he's learned from Grandma. When in doubt, give it a hard whack. He manages to whack the EMF device loose, where it crashes to the ground and is destroyed, and the power to London then gets restored. The Hood, unfortunately, makes his escape, and Penelope tells Virgil he has to hurry to catch the Hood, and but he's conflicted. Should he go for the Hood, or should he rescue the woman who's in danger in the crane? And he chooses to go and rescue the woman in the crane, which I think was the best decision overall.
Mainly because International Rescue's first priority is to save life, as it always should be.
Which I think was, I can't remember who said it, but it was in the episode 30 Minutes Afternoon, where somebody said, International Rescue are strictly a rescue organisation, they're not a police force.
I think it might have been Jeff. Might have been Jeff before before we see their meeting with the cartel, but and again it's getting off the subject.
Yeah. Yes. So Virgil gets his power gear, his power lifter gear, which we saw in
Ring of Fire
again. So yes, that's come back again, and he manages to wrench the jammed crane door open and manages to get the woman out right before the crane collapses into the street. And the episode ends with Virgil, Grandma Tracy, and having tea with Lady Penelope. And of course,
of Sherbet.
Yes, and a brief cameo at the end from Sherbet, having a little spat with Parker, which I was very pleased to see. Always enjoyed seeing that. Now, have I missed anything? Let's see.
I think you missed out the part with the Hood just before the tea scene.
Oh yes, that's right. When the Hood gets into the control room of his inner sanctum of his ship, and he reaches into his jacket to pull out the codex, and he ends up pulling out Parker's flashlight. To which he goes, no, 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 no!
His reaction was just so over the top that I ended up just laughing. I just ended up laughing when I saw that.
Yeah, I agree. That was a great moment from the Hood there. And it turns out that Parker had done the old switcheroo when he whilst tussling with the Hood.
Trying to get away after letting off a flash bomb.
Yes, during the struggle, he quickly swapped his flashlight with the codex. I think I really like this one. Let's see. Just checking my notes here. We get some great character development from Virgil, as he, as the theme of this episode is he has to try and overcome his dependency on his rescue equipment, which he sees as his only role in international rescue is to use the heavy equipment and to be the heavy lifter. And he feels, you know, without his technologies, he's nothing. But Grandma Tracy, you know, says, "Oh, for crying out loud, boy, grow up." You know, I didn't raise no sissy boy. And she manages to, like I said, her best quote was, "It's not the gear that rescues people; it's the Tracy that does it." And I like that. We get some fantastic model work. Like I said, the miniature air view of London was done great, and the street views of London were pretty nicely done. I like the architecture they did for London. Like I said, as Thunderbird 2 was crashing at the beginning of the episode, I kept having flashbacks to Terror in New York City.
And they actually did that in the preview episode, in that preview documentary, No Strings Attached. I instantly thought, is that a reference to Terror in New York City?
Yes, and somebody on Tumblr even did a collection of animated GIFs with both scenes side by side. What else?
Well, one thing that struck me about this episode in particular is that they used Thunderbird 2 to basically go on a more or less leisure trip.
Yeah. Which judging from the judging by how Virgil and Gordon were talking at the beginning of the episode, it looks like that wasn't the intention. He was just going to get Grandma there and then go back to the island.
I think in a few episodes they were seeing the family on Tracy Island were usually seen with either one or two private jets that they used for leisurely excursions.
That's right. Jeff had his blue and silver jet, and Tintin had the little red Ladybird.
Yeah, which was seen in Atlantic Inferno and Give or Take a Million.
That's right. When her and Scott went to the mainland to do some Christmas shopping.
And when Jeff decided to take a holiday.
That's right. Like I said, we had the return of the stealth mine from Space Race. That computer prop was reused. Grandma Tracy's second best line, I think, in this episode: "When in doubt, give it a good old-fashioned whack." Which I think everybody has. I think everybody's done that at some point, where they got so frustrated with a piece of technology, like, what the heck? Just give it a good old-fashioned whack.
It just reminds me also of the of the chocolate oranges you get. Don't tap it, whack it.
Yes. We get our first, the first ever mention of Grandpa Tracy, who I don't think we heard very much about him in the original series, so it's interesting to hear about him as this sort of old world adventurer type who would go on like hikes or safaris with
it's mainly covering material that I think was never ever covered in the original. I mean, most of the time it focused around Jeff, I believe.
Yes, it does. Let's see. We get a really good close-up look at Virgil's power suit he first used in Ring of Fire, but we get a much close up and better look at it in this story, and it seems that the left arm, the right arm appears to be a huge two-pronged, almost like a forklift style lifting arm, whilst the left arm, or the left armature, seems to have some sort of three-pronged grabber or grapple, which is interesting. It also has a degree of head protection as well for Virgil, to protect his head when from any falling debris, and I quite like it. That's the kind of sort of modern equipment they would use, and I understand that on the official Thunderbirds website it's described as the jaws of life, which again is a reference to an actual piece of rescue equipment, firefighting equipment, that is used by firefighters to cut into wrecked cars to get people out of wrecked cars.
I believe that would be correct.
So perhaps that's what the large sort of two-pronged grabber on the left side or on the right arm was used for. Maybe that's used for cutting through heavy steel or metal.
I'm thinking that the one on the right hand is used for more heavy pieces, to carry larger and possibly heavier bits of equipment, while the left hand one is more precision. It's more precision based. If we need to grab something in particular, use that.
Yeah, I want to see them release something like that to go with the new Virgil action figure. Also, I heard that I saw this earlier in the week. The new Tracy Island they're releasing, a section of it is Brains' lab, and that laboratory is in scale with the Brains figure they'll be releasing. So, yes, we will.
All we need now is a Baymax. Or is it just Max?
Yeah, I think it's just Max.
Yeah. And Hero 6.
I think that's everything I've got down on my notes. So, yeah, I've got nothing more. I think it's time for our final thoughts here. My final thoughts: I liked this episode. I also like the message that technology isn't necessarily bad, but we have to remind ourselves that we don't have to always depend on technology. That technology is nothing without the people running it. Depend on yourself, not on your technology. That's what Grandma taught. To me, that's what Grandma Tracy was trying to convey throughout this episode. That you don't have to worry about your technology. It's you. You have the power to. When it comes down to it, you are the one making the crucial decision. It's down to you, not your gear.
For me, the thing about the technology quote is that I saw a few people raise this before on forums and such, but events such as blackouts and that could happen in the future, and mainly due to salt storms and such. And it's more or less whether we'd be able to cope with that. So that there's a kind of like a metaphorical message in there.
Yeah, where I live here in Spain, we kind of get power cuts on occasion, and we've learned to live with it. You know, at the most we'll probably get perhaps 2, maybe 3 power cuts a year, and I learn to live with it. We keep little flashlights, little LED buttons that we press to light up the corridors, and we have a large flashlight downstairs or a large torch downstairs. So we're prepared when it does happen. It's nothing to worry about. They usually usually when there is a power cut, it's during the day, and it doesn't usually last, at the most, maybe a few minutes. But occasionally they will happen, and it will be quite a while. But you adapt and you cope, and I think that was Grandma Tracy's point. You adapt and you can learn to cope without your technology.
The other major thing that I liked particularly in the episode was the characters, particularly Parker and the Hood's reaction at the end.
Yeah, but Parker got some great lines in this episode.
Not to mention, he kind of reveals a little bit about his backstory, kind of like in Vault of Death.
Yeah, that he had a history of being in prison and being a criminal.
Yeah.
And how
or as he calls it,
last time he was away. Yes, it happened the last time I was away. You mean in prison? Well, if you want to be blunt, yes. Yeah, I really liked this episode. It was very much a character-driven story. Not too much action, but the initial threat carried the story and had to force the characters to go on. And I liked that. I thought it was yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed looking at character-driven episodes, and I think Unplugged was a good, strong character-driven story. And it looks...
We can all get behind.
Yes. And it looks to be the next episode, which is called The Runaway, looks to be a character and... a combination character and action-driven episode, and will be another Scott-centric episode, but will also bring Brains onto the front lines to try and solve a runaway monorail train, which seems to harken back to Brink of Disaster.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of episodes that are harking back and nodding to the original series, and I like that.
Not to mention, they do it in a way which is different, but still uses little hints and nods to the original.
Yeah, so the fans of the original series can say, "Ah, I see what they did there. Yeah, I like that." So yeah, overall, yeah, Unplugged was a really good episode. The episodes, for the most part, seem to be consistently really good.
I think I'll be looking forward to the next few episodes that are coming out.
Yes, I'm particularly looking forward to the next episode after Unplugged, Runaway, which is EOS, which will be the first Scott John-centric episode, which I'm really looking forward to. Poor old John, stuck there in space, but apparently he enjoys it up there. I imagine this is something that doesn't get talked about much, but I can only imagine how some of the brothers must feel. First, they lost their mother, and now they've lost their dad. Oh my God! Psychologically, how absolutely messed up must they be right now? That's probably why John is up in space right now. He doesn't want to face the reality of it. He doesn't want to come back down to Earth. He wants to stay up in space, as if by staying up in space he can
avoid the big issue.
Exactly. But again, that's just speculation. So we'll see you. Sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, of course, they might be. If they ever decide to bring Jeff Tracy back, that could add a whole new level to character building in future episodes.
Yeah, agreed. So, yeah, I guess we're done here. See everyone. See you all next week when we do Runaway. Yes, Runaway. I've been Aaron Izzard.
I've been Stephen. See you next time on Thundercast Is Go.
See you later on Thundercast Is Go.